Welcome, everybody. My name is Corey Jones, and I'm with Compassion Works for All. In case you don't know who I am, I'm the director here. And welcome to First Tuesday. The purpose of these conversations is to engage with people just throughout the country, throughout the world, hopefully in some cases, that are in the mindfulness world, and also that have some crossover with prison, incarceration, law enforcement. And so our guest today is Kim Colegrove, and she meets every single one of those points. And so I'm super excited to hear from Kim. And just a reminder, as we often say, that this is a way for us to say thank you to our supporters. You guys give so much to us, and you just give and give and give and give in order to keep our mission going. And so this is an opportunity for us to give something back to you. So we're glad to get to share in this. I believe that's all of my housekeeping things that I need to cover today. We'll have about a 35 to 40 minute discussion, and then I do want to leave some time at the end just in case there are questions from folks who are watching either here on Zoom or on Facebook. So we'll wrap up right at about an hour. So all that to say, welcome everybody. Kim, thank you so much for being here with us. Do you want to take just a second to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're up to?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be a part of the conversation. My name's Kim Colegrove. I am, I think at heart, I think of myself as a meditation and mindfulness teacher. I'm also an author of a book called Mindfulness for Warriors. And I also have an organization called Pause First Academy, and we offer resilience training focused on holistic wellness and work-life balance, targeted for first responders. And we sort of have like a kind of a secondary group that works with us that I don't think they're not traditionally considered first responders, and they don't maybe consider themselves first responders, but we work with a lot of folks in corrections, and we've just gotten connected with a lot of folks in parole and probation as well. And the thing is, with all these different professions, it doesn't matter what your job is. It doesn't matter the differences in the job. Corrections sometimes feels very left out of the loop. Same thing with dispatchers. But what I want to say to all the different professions is trauma didn't get the memo that you're in different jobs. Yeah. And what I've learned in doing this work since 2017 is that the trauma is very similar across all these professions. So we work with law enforcement, fire, EMS, dispatchers, corrections, parole and probation. We've had a lot of mental health professionals come to us in healthcare as well. And the stress and the burnout and the compassion fatigue and the trauma, all very similar across, and also military veterans, very similar across all these professions. So that's what I'm doing now. I suppose I should give you a teeny little bit of background. My journey with meditation began in 1976 when I was 10 years old. My parents had me trained in a technique that's called transcendental meditation. Transcendental meditation is still around. It's a very viable technique. It's what a lot of our research is based on. It's not what I practice anymore, and it's not what I teach. But that was definitely the foundation that helped me create the methodologies that I ended up using to teach people about meditation down the road. And in January of 2011, I quit my full-time job to teach meditation and mindfulness full-time. And so I worked with a lot of private clients. I taught a lot of small classes, and I've also taught in corporate settings like Garmin International, United Way, Department of Veterans Affairs, National Court Reporters Association. And that's what I was doing prior to 2014 when I made the slow transition from corporate work into first responder work. And that is because I unfortunately lost my own husband to suicide just less than 3 months after he retired from a 30-year law enforcement career. So that really caused me to sort of shift my awareness. And I learned just how devastating these professions can be on people that work in the professions that I listed. And I just felt very compelled to to do something. So I completely shifted, and now it's all I do is work with this demographic. Boy, that was a long intro.
Well, you read my notes then, because that was exactly the trajectory that we were going to take. So that was perfect. So thank you for that. And I do want to be sure to mention that we are going to reference from time to time things like depression, trauma, suicide. And so I want everybody to be aware of that, just in case that's a difficult topic for you, or something that you think, you know what, maybe I just want to have some good feelings today. So this might be a good time to step out maybe, but we are certainly going to address those. And that's how I came across you and your work, Kim, was just in doing my own research. I have your book here, Mindfulness for Warriors. We are at Compassion Works for All getting ready to branch out and start offering mindfulness training for law enforcement personnel and security personnel. And so we've been trying to do some research with that. We've got a contract in the works with Arkansas Community Corrections. They deal mostly with probation and parole. So we're first going to get probation and parole officers trained. So that was how I first came across you and your work. But with the other information that I was reading, it was pretty clinical, and it was, it had some good research and things backing it. But yours was just so personal, and just so the investment in your work isn't just that mindfulness has affected your life, but you see where mindfulness could potentially transform the lives of other people, especially first responders, law enforcement, security personnel. And that's what I was just so drawn to, that the personal element that you have that speaks to a layer of it that other people just can't. So all that to say, thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for mentioning that. I think I do tell my story in the book pretty honestly, and really the story of my husband and, the trajectory of his career that I think, eventually led to the level of anxiety and depression that he was not able to overcome. But I think the heart of the book is the 9 first responders that I interviewed in the middle of the book. They were so honest and vulnerable in sharing that they had struggled or suffered similarly to my husband. And they have varied backgrounds. So combat veterans, law enforcement, dispatcher, fire, EMS. And they all share how they found a healing path and how they stay healthy. And of course, all of them mentioned meditation or mindfulness. And I want to be clear, I do not think meditation and mindfulness are the end all be all. They are 2 really powerful personal practices that can help you get on a healing path and really transform your life. So I always want to be clear about that, because I'm not trying to oversell it as, just learn how to meditate and you'll be fine. It's not that. But yeah, hearing from, and I think that's what draws a lot of people in, is when they read the stories of the 9 first responders. And we're working now with an organization in Oregon, and it's parole and probation. We're actually going, me and my team, to do a 2-day wellness conference. But they got started, someone in their organization read the book and read it out loud to her husband when they were on a road trip. And her husband has had to retire from parole and probation because he was badly injured by an offender. And she reached out to me and said, I read it aloud, and my husband cried, because for the first time he felt seen and validated, like someone understands what he's gone through. And it was those 9 first responders that spoke to their, anyway. Yeah.
Well, and you also don't really pull any punches in the book either. I mean, you get pretty raw and honest. And even in the beginning, there was a quote that I've underlined and highlighted. Speaking to first responders and law enforcement personnel, you said, when you retire, assuming that you live that long, all the garbage that you've stuffed down and held in will still be there. It doesn't magically disappear. It rots and festers. And the day after you retire, the job goes on as if you never existed, which means the job is just fine, whether you're there or not. And I thought, man, that's brutal. But also like just a harsh reality. And so I guess I don't have a specific question with that, but could you talk about that a little bit, about just the reality of this job is in some ways, we just need a warm body there, keeping guard or posting. And so if you're not there, we're just going to find somebody else to do it, even though you're investing your entire life in this. Like, could you just talk about that a little bit?
Yes, I can. Well, when you read that back to me, I sound like a little bit of a jerk, but I think one thing that I've done over the years is I've forced myself to be more and more honest. And the first time I really did that was, I think it was the spring or summer of 2018. And I wrote an article for In Public Safety, and it was published on policeone.com as well. And for the first time ever, I was very, very honest about my husband's struggles and the problem, the issues that created in our marriage and in the family. And listen, he was an amazing human being. He was my favorite person. He was my best friend. I adored him. He was goofy. He had a great sense of humor. And it was very hard for me to be honest about the other side and, what the years of stress and trauma, how that impacted him. But anyway, and so I decided with that, once I allowed them to publish that, I thought, well, this is what I need to do. I need to be honest. So where that stems from, what you just read, was as I look back over the year leading up to my husband's retirement, I see red flags now that I didn't realize then. And that kind of a slow unraveling as the anxiety and the pressure and the depression and the, everything, like I said, it was all inside of him. He had stuffed it, and he had officially retired, but he had to go back into his office. Now, he was a police officer for 8 years, and then he was a federal agent for 22 years. So I very strongly believe those 8 years in a patrol car did more damage than anything else in his life or his career. But so he was working in an office, still law enforcement investigator, but he had to go back to his office for some reason. And he came home and he was just in kind of a down mood. And he said, I think it had only been a couple of days since he had moved out of his office. And he said, I went to the office and it's like I never existed. They've already moved somebody into my office. It's like I never existed. And I think that was so hard for him because he took his job very seriously and he poured everything into it for so many years and, 30 years. And it was very difficult for him to realize that it kind of didn't matter whether he was there or not. Everything was going to move forward. And he had just worked a massive case that year. It took 2 federal prosecutors to work this case he had done. He was really good at his job. He won 2 big time awards that year, 1 national award and 1 MOCIC award and all that. And he retired. And 2 or 3 days later, he said, it's like I was never there. And it sounds kind of cold and kind of cruel. However, I really want people to think about this because it's important to do your job and to do a good job. And but it's also important to work on your life at the same time that you're working on your career and in promoting or whatever it is that you're focused on, because we've been trained in this society to focus on career first. And we tend to let everything else go. And then you add on to that you're in an incredibly stressful profession and you see and hear and do and smell things that nobody else understands or will ever know. Mm-hmm. And that compounds your propensity to isolate, to not work on your social life and your family relationships and your marriage. And so I think it is important to be really honest with people about your job's important. I'm not saying quit your job or quit doing a good job, but you've got to work on your mental, your emotional health, your own physical health, and your life, your relationships.
Yes. And so I would love to hear how you help, especially first responders and law enforcement officers do that, because even just thinking about myself and my life, I have a ministry background. And in 2017, the church where I was a pastor, we closed the church down. And our family wanted to stay here in the Little Rock area, so we didn't want to just up and move and go to some other city, some other church. So I just got out of ministry altogether. And the identity crisis that goes along with leaving your profession, where this isn't just what I do, but it's who I am. I really had to go through a significant I don't know, sort of inner working process to separate those two things from each other, what I do from who I am. And it's extraordinarily hard. But I would think that in law enforcement, though, especially where you are so dedicated to your job determines so much of your professional and personal life, but then also the culture within a law enforcement agency where everyone is committed to this thing. And this is what identifies everybody as I'm a cop, or I'm the sheriff, or I'm whatever. Like, how do you help people see the benefit of separating identity from job when that's kind of part of what they might love about the job?
Yeah. And when you're in these professions, you're working around a lot of top performers, type A personalities, go-getters, and so it's very difficult thing to separate out. I think my team and I were really just trying to inspire people to, maybe for the first time ever, to put themselves and their own personal lives on their list, the things that they're on their achievement list. And I guess just for the first time ever, maybe consider their mental and emotional and physical health, because a lot of people that I encounter are living in, they're on autopilot in whatever is their version of survival mode. And everybody thinks, I'll take better care of myself when I get to this point or that point, but right now I'm just too busy. I just got to keep my legs moving. I just got to keep going. And then, in these professions, especially, you're talking about warriors, guardians, healers, the helpers in our society, super go-getters. And in these professions where they're helping us, they're helping people, taking care of others, overseeing things, very important. So they are the helpers. We are the helpers. We don't need help. We don't ask for help. And I just think we have to rethink that. I think we have to reprogram the entire system, and we got to put ourselves on our own list. And self-care is not nonsense or woo-woo or it doesn't make you a sissy if you take good care of yourself. It's so important because, unfortunately, I meet a lot of people my age. I'm 55. I meet a lot of people my age and just a little younger and just a little older who are on their second or third marriage, have problems, alcohol problems, addiction problems, a lot of health problems, and adult children who won't speak to them, estranged relationships. I meet a lot of people who, have gotten after it for a career that's been very good to them, that they've given a lot to. And there's a lot of accolades around that career and pride.
Yeah.
But everything else fell apart. And that literally breaks my heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that compassion also, that element of, I think culturally right now we're in a place where, in many circles, law enforcement is the enemy. Law enforcement is like the problem with society. And not to say that there's not a need for improvement, but with the work that you do, with the personal investment that you have, and the compassion that you clearly have for first responders, what is your response, or what's your feeling whenever you hear very critical language or accusatory language toward law enforcement personnel? Like, how do you navigate that and interact with that?
Well, it's difficult because I really can see both sides. I understand why people are angry. And you're right. There are some improvements that need to be made immediately and should have been made a long time ago. But it's like so many different factions in our society right now, just, everybody hating whole groups. And, coming from law enforcement, and I know obviously a lot of law enforcement professionals, there are so many really stellar human beings that give so much to this job. And I don't know, on both sides of it, I think everyone needs to take a deep breath and just, it's not, there are some systematic issues that need improvement for sure. But this rhetoric is harming individuals. And just a really quick story. I had to have my car serviced one time, and it was going to be there for the day. So I was getting a ride home. And so was another gentleman. So they had the courtesy car, and two of us were in there. And the two men were sitting in the front seat. And they started to complain about, over here is where cops back in and set up traps and look for speeders. And oh yeah, what a bunch of jerks. They don't have anything better to do. I live in the suburbs. They don't have anything better to do around here than, hassle people and write tickets. And I couldn't listen to it for very long. And so I said, hey, my husband was law enforcement, and I just told him what happened, and I said, if you'd like, I could give you a list of what else that officer has done probably this month, what he's done and seen. And I could just list off a few things that he's done and seen in his career right here in the suburbs. Because yes, he writes tickets, that's part of his job, but he's also worked fatality car accidents. He goes to infant not breathing calls. He goes to domestic violence calls that you would never even want someone to describe to you. And I mean, I just listed off a bunch of, and they were silent. And the passenger said, ma'am, my brother is a combat veteran, and I should know better than to talk the way I did. And so we ended up having a really good conversation. But shoot, I mean, sometimes we have to bring it down to the individual level and realize there are so many good people at doing such good work, protecting us and saving us. And what in the world would we do without the police? I mean, my goodness. So yeah, that's a hard one.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. But I love the approach that you're taking with, not just with compassion, but I think it's so key, like you're saying, to individualize it, that these are, at the end of the day, these are human beings. And just like you, just like me, just like all of us, they're just trying to be happy with their life. They're just trying to do what gives them some peace and satisfaction. And along the way, they're incurring a lot of trauma through their work. And I'm also mindful of, and I don't mean the pun there of mindful, but thinking about security personnel inside prisons. And I'm curious if you've worked with that population, how much you've worked with them, and if you've noticed any like unique needs for people inside of the prison units. And the reason I ask, our work at Compassion Works for All has exclusively been with people inside jails and prisons, working with the inmates that live there historically. And so we're branching out a little bit, but that's where the bulk of our work has gone. And so from time to time, we do find ourselves either frustrated with, or, like today, I was down at our county jail, and I go in 3 mornings a week to teach mindfulness to 3 different groups of people. And today they had security was completely different. I had to wait for them to open the doors, and I had to be escorted for the first time. And I'm kind of grumbling, and I'm trying to get to my class, and I'm late, and you guys and your rules, and rah, rah, rah. But statistically, if you look at their life, I think their life expectancy is the lowest of all law enforcement and first responders. I think it's at like 56 or 57 is the life expectancy of a security officer. The amount of just physical and emotional, mental, spiritual trauma that they incur from day to day, the stress that they face, it seems like a unique, and I'm sure that each branch we could go through and say, these are the unique issues facing this one and this one and this one. But I'm just curious, just because this does kind of hit closer to home with our work, if you've encountered that or what you've experienced with security personnel.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the members of my team, almost everybody on my team, all of my trainers have backgrounds as military. They're military veterans or first responders or retired first responders. And they've also been teachers, trainers, speakers in their own professions. And one of the team members has a background in corrections and law enforcement, 28 years law enforcement. She ran a jail system for 3 years. So I've learned a lot from her. And our biggest client actually is the state of Missouri Department of Corrections. And they have a subscription to our online academy, and they offer it to all of their employees as a wellness option. Wow. And I've learned a lot. We've been working with them for about a year now, and I've learned a lot from working with them. And I and 2 members of my team, we were there about 2 weeks ago. We traveled to Jefferson City, Missouri, and did a training for all their training leaders from around the state. And as part of that training, I handed out cards and asked everybody there to answer 2 questions for me. One, what courses would they like added to the academy? What do they want to see more of? And also, if they could just share with me their pain points in life. What are they living with? What are they dealing with? What are the stressors, their biggest stressors? And I asked them to specifically talk about the stress outside of work, whatever they wanted to say. And a surprising number filled those out. And that was some really great feedback for me, because the stress of that job, again, it's this thing that if you're not on the inside of it, people who are not in corrections or don't understand corrections, parole, probation, they do not understand what a corrections officer does, sees, lives with, that amount of crushing stress all the time. And so a lot of, the obvious, what you would expect, the fights and all that, a lot of organizational stuff, the people I work with, people I work for, the people who work for me, that kind of a thing. But oh my gosh, so much going on in the background. And that's a whole other layer of the stress in these professions. So marriage issues, money issues, health issues, aging parents, children with disabilities, and a lot of people, because it was an anonymous, it wasn't mandated that they fill this out, and it was anonymous. A lot of people dealing with pretty serious anxiety, depression, burnout, compassion fatigue, and things like that. And so I'm learning a lot by working with these organizations and just asking questions. I'm polling people, and it's unbelievable to me how much of themselves they devote, whole careers. This is such a crucial part of our society. And that, like you said, their life expectancy is shorter than the average person. So I just think it's far past time for the organizations to address this.
Yeah.
And I mean from recruitment to retirement and beyond retirement, because unfortunately we lose a lot of these people just past and past retirement. So, again, there's unique specifics to the types of stress and traumas in each of these professions. For corrections officers, there's a lot of fighting that's happening on a daily basis, and you never know when some of this is going to erupt. And then a combat veteran has, a different stress and trauma that they carry than a police officer in a patrol car. But the damage to the mind and the body and the social life and the relationships and everything else, that is really similar across all of these professions. So I think there's 2 approaches we have to take, 3, really 3. It's us as a society understanding what these people do for us, and helping them, figuring out ways to help them. It's the organizations realizing the mental and emotional and physical health of their employees is crucial, and it has to matter now, and they have to pay attention to it, and it has to become their business. And then the individuals seeking health and well-being and tools, like meditation and mindfulness, since that's what we're talking about. But there's many, 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 many other tools that you can, bring into your life. And I hate to say this because, to pile one more thing onto anybody's plate or to-do list, but that personal responsibility, the individual taking responsibility for their own health, that's really what's going to make the difference. And that's what I'm hoping to inspire and motivate by speaking out about this.
Yeah. Oh man, I will back that platform. That's fantastic. And I think you're right, because that's just in our very, very limited experience with this, that has been probably the number one question that comes up is, when am I supposed to do this? And like, how am I, like you say, because especially if this isn't just your job, but on top of this, you've got all the things at home, you've got children you're caring for, you've got, especially the women in corrections, or women who are police officers who might be single parents and they're trying to raise their kids, or, when am I supposed to think about myself? And so it seems like working it into part of the job, and having that woven into the DNA of the work, it has got to be at least an option, if that's going to happen. I love that. I love that. We've got about 5 minutes left just for me to have all the questions. But so I'm just curious, for you yourself, you're doing this work, you've experienced trauma in your own life. And so what do you do to just take care of yourself, as you're trying to help people learn how to take care of their own minds and emotions? What do you do?
Well, the foundation of my wellness, and really, I believe the foundation of well-being is really the concept of mindfulness. So understanding the importance of developing the ability to bring your full awareness into the here and now, because as human beings, we spend the majority of our time dwelling in the past, or future focused, worrying, focused a lot on circumstances and people we cannot control. So learning the power of bringing your awareness into the present moment, because until you can do that, you probably won't check in with yourself in order to know how you're actually doing mentally, emotionally, physically. It's in just a few seconds or a few minutes of stillness and silence with the self that you can become more familiar with yourself. And then you can tend to what is out of balance. If you don't do some version of that, you're going to continue living in this on autopilot, in this survival mode, because you've probably trained yourself to mentally override your mental distress, your emotional distress, and even physical pain. And so I'm asking you to undo that. And, and it's hard. It's hard. I mean, I completely understand. I didn't even have one of these professions. When I did work full time, it was a corporate job. I mean, it was time investment, but I loved my work. I loved the people I worked with. I had, a lot of kids and a lot of stuff going on, and I was pretty much busy from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. every single day. And, it's hard. That was hard. I would have to get up. The reason I got up at 5 or 5:30 was because between 5 and 6 a.m. was the only time of the day my house was quiet and still, that I could take a little time for mindfulness, for reflection. I think we have to come up with a lot more terminology and words to help people understand, because meditation and mindfulness, sometimes people think it's hippy dippy or new agey or weirdo, or they kind of don't understand it. So, it's about paying attention to yourself, your life mattering, your health mattering now. It has to matter now and along the path. You can't wait until kids graduate, the kids move out, you retire. All these, we keep pushing, this finish line forward. I'll be happy then. I'll take care of myself then. So you can call it self-reflection. You can call it quiet time, whatever it is. And listening, like checking in. How am I doing? How's my mental health? How's my emotional health? How am I feeling? How have I been feeling lately? How's my physical health? How do I feel physically? Is there anything I'm ignoring or overriding? And, I don't know what it's going to take to convince people of the importance of this. And I understand the time restraints, but if you don't take care of you, who's going to? Nobody else is going to. And you are headed for illness and disease, and there's just no way around it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely critical work. And it's odd to me how difficult it is to keep our mind in the present, keep terminology I tend to use is keep your mind and body in the same space and in the same time. But it seems like that ought to be so simple and so easy, but it can certainly be difficult and frustrating. And so, man, well, thank you so much for sharing all of that, and especially for getting into your story and your background and your work. I do want to spend the last little bit of time here just in case anyone has questions or thoughts or anything that you'd like to ask of Kim. We will open that up, and so you feel free to just unmute yourself and speak up, or if you'd rather type it out in the chat, go ahead and do that.
While we're waiting to see if people have anything they'd like to ask or if they want to chime in, I did want to share with you that the organization in Oregon that my team and I are doing the 2-day conference for, they are doing a book club based on my book this month in July, which I think that's incredible. Yeah. And so when they told me that, I said, oh, that's interesting, because in September, I'm launching a masterclass based on my book. And I'm telling you this for anybody who might be listening or might listen to the playback later on Facebook. Yeah. That's like, I would like to feel better. I would like to be better. I am in a slump. I am miserable. I mean, anywhere from dissatisfied to suffering, anywhere in between. But I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get started. I'm going to host a master class. It starts in September. And if you're at all interested, it's going to go through the book, but I'm also going to provide lots of resources and the steps to take and, lots of different approaches. And we're going to draw from others in these professions who have, are ahead of you, have already gotten started. And so if anyone's interested, they could just go to my website, which is pausefirst.com, and sign up for the newsletter. That's going to be the best way. And then I can start letting you know what's going to happen there. Because that's one way that, I can help people get started, because getting started is the hardest part. Once you get started and you feel a little bit better, it becomes easier.
Mm-hmm. Yes. That's exciting. Very, very cool. It's a great idea. All right. Any thoughts or questions anyone would like to ask?
The thing I was interested in is that you said your original connection was meditation was through a TM practice when you're something like 10, I think you said your parents taught it to you. And I'm a sociologist with a lot of different interests and also practice different forms of meditation, but I'm so interested in how we get into this through different practices, including TM, which was very popular in the 70s and is still around, and a lot of people still do it. But it seems to me that sometimes groups that have found one way focus too much on that one tool or that one way to do something. And it seems that you've had experience with a broad range, or at least a range of different kinds of meditations. And I guess with that meditation practices, is that part of your conscious approach to leave it very wide open in terms of what suits a particular individual and their way into meditation? I hope that's a question that isn't too broad.
Yeah, no, you nailed it. That's exactly what I've done. I was trained in transcendental meditation. I practiced it for years. I really understand that practice. And I spent several years exploring other practices, other techniques, other teachers. And when I stepped out to do this work, I knew that I needed to teach this in a really straightforward, mainstream way, using mainstream language. Mm-hmm. And so I pulled from my experience with TM and then all the other techniques I had experimented with. And I just kind of created my own thing. And I tell people all the time, if anyone tells you that there's any one way to meditate and this is it, and it has to be this many minutes and you do this thing, they're absolutely wrong. Nobody owns meditation. And there are many different approaches. I teach 4 different techniques because I understand we all have different brains. We all have different learning styles, and different approaches are going to work for different individuals. And then I build a ton of flexibility into each one of those techniques even. And I'm always sending people, I'm saying, go find a different teacher, apps, books. There's so many ways to approach it. But Stella, you are exactly right. It was a very conscious approach that I took to this. My very first big job was Garmin International, and there was 100+ people in an auditorium. That was my first big corporate, experience. And they were largely engineers. So I knew even then, that was probably, 2013 or something. I knew then if I walk in there dressed like Stevie Nicks and I like candles and incense, they're all going to split. So I had to kind of bring some logic and some strategy to it. And that has also worked with me worked for me in the first responder professions as well.
Thank you so much. That's really interesting.
Yeah, that was a good question, because that was very conscious on my part.
And I will also add that that's something that we're having to learn as well. As I've shared with you in the past, Kim, that learning how to teach mindfulness to law enforcement, first responders is a completely different thing than the way we've been teaching it inside jails and prisons. And I say completely different. Obviously, there's commonality and overlap, but we have to know the audience we're speaking to and try to understand what it is that not only that they're going to hear, but also what's going to be helpful for them in the world that they're operating in. And so we're trying to learn how to be just as good, if not better, listeners as we move forward, as we are teachers, because you just have to know your audience.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I believe, well, two things. And it's why almost my entire team, they all have backgrounds in military and first responder professions, because I think that's important. They understand that those personality types, they understand what the job really demands, and all of that. And they're all practitioners of meditation and mindfulness. They all have their own topics and things they focus on and teach. But and then the other thing is just allowing lots of flexibility. And so if someone only has 1 or 2 minutes in a day and they can't do 15 or 20 minutes, it's okay, there's a starting place. So if you can do 2 minutes, do 2 minutes. And then over the next 6 months or year, whatever, build up and add. But so building in lots of flexibility so that they can kind of, design a strategy that will work for them, fit their life. And yeah.
Because then it becomes something that you're not doing it because this is what somebody told me you have to do in order to do it the right way. You're doing it because you go, wow, I actually really enjoy this. I enjoy it while I'm doing it. I enjoy the benefit of it. And so therefore, I'm going to start prioritizing it more and more because I personally am benefiting from it. Whereas if you're trying to force it in where it doesn't fit, then it's just clunky and very quickly gets shoved aside. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And I love in my classes and presentations, I love to offer short, like mini or micro practices that very active, very busy people can drop into their day. So, if you don't have to necessarily sit with all the pomp and circumstance, but if you can just learn to breathe and discover what mindfulness feels like by just, using your breath for 1 minute at a time. Well, you can do that any place, anytime, at work. I think the biggest thing probably for first responders and the surrounding professions is a lot of people have said to me, I don't want to become all like chill and laid back because I can't lose my edge, being vigilant is part of my job, or, precautionary thinking is part of my job. So I'm not really, I don't want to like chill out and be some kind of a hippie. So you gotta, there's a lot of explaining and teaching that you have to, I know you know this because you do this, that, using the concept of mindfulness can actually sharpen your mind and help you be more productive at work. It can help you make better decisions. It can help you have better self-control, and that can all benefit you on the job. Yeah. So yeah, it's a huge education curve here for people.
Absolutely. Great question, Stella. Thank you so much for that. Anybody else want to jump in there with a comment or a question? There you go. Now we got you.
Okay. What I'm trying to say is how much I appreciate Corey and Kim, both of you, for focusing on, in a sense, the bigger world of people that in this whole area of the micro world of our prisons, but expanding this out to all of those who serve the people in prisons and serve all of us. I really like you're bringing in first responders and all of those who serve in the prisons. And I had an advantage in terms of working in pretty much the same prisons for decades. And so people who were very hesitant to feel safe with somebody who was working with, in quotes, the prisoners, little by little, they would inch closer and closer till they could feel safe. And whether they were a officer or a warden or any service people that worked in an office, they could sneak a little private time and say, I have cancer, or I'm going through a divorce, or my children are in trouble. And so they could ask for help. And many of them could say, I have a very personal relationship with one of the inmates, or I have fallen in love with somebody, or their issues are very, very unique and ones that many times they couldn't talk about without getting fired. And so in our multi-personal roles, how to hold everybody, which both of you just said, which I applaud, exactly where they are, and value them and love them there. And Kim, what you said about your husband coming back and not feeling loved and valued those few days after leaving, that is just so powerful in terms of absolutely every being in every role, everywhere, how to let people know they're loved and valued no matter what role they are in. And that is exactly, heartbreakingly, what is dividing people up in roles and leaving people devastatingly abandoned and feeling unappreciated. So I really appreciate you focusing on people in so many roles that are almost, told that their role is not important. So I thank you for that, covering this topic today.
Yeah, thank you, Anna. It's always so great to hear from you. Kim, Anna is the founder of Compassion Works for All and has been doing this work since, goodness,
1994.
1994. I won't tell you what grade I was in 1994. We're here because of Anna today. So Anna, thank you so much.
We're all here for each other.
Right. Thank you, Anna, and thank you for the amazing work that you do.
Well, thank you for the amazing work you do, and I really appreciate knowing you're out there touching so many people And Corey knows how much I appreciate he is out there loving everybody he touches. So thank you both.
Thank you. All right. We've got just about 5 minutes left here. If there's anybody else who had a question or a comment that you wanted to make, we will consider that closed then. Kim, was there any last thought that you would like to leave us with in terms of your work or your experiences, or anything that you would just want to make sure that you got across today to those who are listening?
Oh, I would just say, please consider self-care of some sort. Please consider your mental and emotional and your physical health, and make one little change. Tiny little habits can make huge improvements in your life. So if you can make any little change or improvement, and I'm putting my money where my mouth is with this, because I have some areas in my life where I need to improve, and I'm getting ready to launch this masterclass where I'm going to ask people who have never considered self-care and wellness and meditation, mindfulness ever before, but they're sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. So I'm asking them to stretch themselves. So I thought, well, then I've got to stretch myself in some way. So I've recommitted to a regular meditation practice without ever skipping in the morning, because I'm busy, and I'm back to journaling, and I'm just starting to work with a coach to work a little bit on my own physical health, and getting my, I'm busy too, like everybody else. And so the one thing that I let go, and I shouldn't, I'm 55, is my physical exercise and my self-care of my body. And so I'm forcing myself to take some steps and improve in some areas. And so I guess I would just ask anybody who stumbles upon this, find one little improvement, find one little something that you can learn about, whether it's meditation, mindfulness, journaling, any self-care practice, and just focus on that 5 minutes a day or something to get started.
Yes. It's such a great starting point, but also a great kind of like booster shot if you let that slide a little bit, like you say. That's a good foot back in the door. Yeah, excellent, Kim. It's been such a pleasure to talk with you, and inspiring to hear about you and your work. And so, thank you for dedicating yourself to this and for making the world better through what you're doing. So.
Thank you, Corey. It's good to see everybody. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone, thanks for joining in, and we'll see you all next month. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.